අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා.
නව Tomex වැල්ලම් සහ විස බීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. Tomex.
Tonight, actions and consequences. Russian president puts nuclear deterrent on special alert, while state media say peace talks with Ukraine agreed. Travel made easy. No more pre-departure PCR or RAT tests needed for double vaccinated inbound tourists.
This move will help us to boost the bookings coming in, especially for the upcoming summer season.
This important announcement is excellent news for our sector's recovery.
Weight off the Vatican. The Cardinal is set to meet His Holiness the Pope tomorrow. The Easter attack probe on the agenda. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Sunday, the 27th of February, 2022.
100ක් දක්වා ඉසොරි නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දෙයි. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening. Welcome to First at 9. I'm Thamikate 9. Now, the European Union announced today that it decided to remove certain Russian banks from the SWIFT global banking system and freeze the Russian assets overseas, preventing Russia from accessing $630 billion in reserves. As Ukraine-friendly Western nations continue to slap sanctions, President Vladimir Putin responded to what was termed as aggressive statements by NATO by moving Russia's nuclear deterrent to a special state of alert. Some foreign media, meanwhile, say that Ukraine has agreed to hold peace talks with Russia on the Belarus border.
Russian military vehicles pushed into Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, today, destroying oil and gas installations on a fourth day of fighting in the biggest assault on a European state since World War II. A Ukrainian state agency said that Russian troops blew up a natural gas pipeline in Kharkiv before daybreak. Ukrainian emergency services stated that a 9-story residential tower was hit, killing an elderly woman. However, they stated that around 60 people were spared injury as they had taken refuge in the basement. Meanwhile, President Putin ordered his military command to put the country's nuclear deterrent to a special state of alert. This is what Moscow calls aggressive statements by NATO countries. Analysts say that the move is intended as a warning for NATO and not a signal of intent to use nuclear weapons. As the war continues to ravage Ukraine, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees stated that the number of people fleeing Ukraine has now reached 368,000. They stated that more than 150,000 people have entered Poland since the start of the conflict, while more than 43,000 Ukrainians fled to Romania in the 3 days after Russia invaded. After Russia vetoed a resolution that was proposed in the UN Security Council, calling for Russia to stop its invasion in Ukraine, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the world today to scrap Russia's voting power in the UN Security Council and said Russia's actions verged on genocide.
Що вони роблять? Це помста. Народ
They chose a tactic on purpose that is aimed against people's affection and anything else that makes life simply normal. Power plants, hospitals, kindergartens, housing, everything is under fire today. We have to call things by their names. The criminal acts of Russia against Ukraine bear signs of genocide. I talked about this with General Secretary of the United Nations. Russia is on a way towards evil. The world has to start depriving Russia of its right to vote in the UN Security Council.
In the meantime, as Ukraine battles Russia militarily, the rest of the world is on the offensive against the Russian economy. In a move to further strengthen sanctions against Russia, the US and the European Union pondered on the possibility of cutting Russia off the SWIFT financial system. They hoped that the move would limit Moscow's use of a $630 billion war chest of central bank reserves. As such, the European Union announced its decision on the matter.
We are resolved to continue imposing massive costs on Russia. The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine. I will now propose to EU leaders the following measures. First, we commit to ensuring that a certain number of Russian banks are removed from SWIFT. This will ensure that these banks are disconnected from the international financial system and harm their ability to operate globally. We will paralyze the assets of Russia's central bank. This will freeze its transactions, and it will make it impossible for the central bank to liquidate assets. We will work to prohibit Russian oligarchs from using their financial assets on our markets. All of these measures will significantly harm Putin's ability to finance his war. Putin embarked on a path aiming to destroy Ukraine. But what he's also doing, in fact, is destroying the future of his own country.
In light of the announcement by the EU, the Ukrainian president had this to say.
Our diplomats fought around the clock and inspirationally for all European countries to agree on a strong and fair decision to disconnect Russia from the international interbanking network. We have also this important victory. This is billions and billions of losses for Russia, a tangible price for this vile invasion of our country. EU Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Denny Chaibi, believes that Sri Lanka's tourism industry must focus on quality than quantity if it is to sustainably move forward. His views came during a conversation with Indi Vriyamuatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24.
Is the European Union concerned about Sri Lanka's situation of moving into a debt trap?
You know, a debt trap is a characterization that has been associated with perhaps certain countries, and it's, you know, it doesn't concern the EU. What is clear is if you have a public debt that is close to 100% of your GDP, you have to think about how to rationalize that debt. So, for example, the country I know best, Belgium, we had a debt at 120% public debt. So we started a program of rationalization of expenditures, and we were lucky enough to be part of the euro and to have a more manageable debt, and we committed to have maximum 3% of fiscal deficit every year. So we took a number of measures to manage that debt, and I assume that the government is looking at the same set of measures. The only thing is that with COVID and the economic impact of COVID, they could not implement that early, and now it's for them to decide. It's not for the EU to prescribe any policy, but we have been there and we know that there's a way out.
With some of the strongest powers in Sri Lanka investing in Sri Lanka, is there also any questions on the part of involvement of countries and the share of involvement of countries in Sri Lanka for especially investment projects?
We in the European Union are not so much focused on the investments of other countries in Sri Lanka. We are focused on the possibilities for all investors, and we are interested in an open and fair environment, clear, predictable. What we want is an interaction with the world. If there are more people investing in Sri Lanka and it brings welfare to Sri Lankans, so much the better. I think the main concern is that it's fair for everyone, that it's a level playing field. And another thing that is very close to the heart of the EU, and especially cycling all around Sri Lanka, I'm very sensitive to that, is the environmental impact. Sri Lanka is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world in terms of climate change. If I remember the first time I came, 2015, and now the erosion on all the beach, either Unawatuna or Tangol or Hikadua, you see the buildings are very close to the road, and therefore the sea cannot prolong, so it's more abrupt and it takes away sand. I can see that it's a very vulnerable country to climate change, and so economic interests have to be managed in a way that take into account the long-term sustainability impact.
EU Ambassador to Sri Lanka Denny Chaibi also believes that quantity is never the way forward for Sri Lanka, but quality is, and that aspect must be capitalized when promoting Sri Lanka as a tourist destination.
Tourism took a double blow after the Easter Sunday attacks. It was hard hit, and again now due to the pandemic. Moving forward, what steps do you think we should take in order to achieve sustainable tourism, in order to ensure that Sri Lanka also sustains this destination as a high-end market, especially with the European tourists?
It's a subject very close to the heart of Europeans. First of all, Europeans provide a very large number of tourists to Sri Lanka, and they stay longer, they spend more, they go for higher quality, and I think that they're very respectful of Sri Lankans. So I think European tourists can be proud of what they bring to Sri Lanka. Now, as European taxpayers, they have provided Sri Lanka with roughly almost 6 million euros, so more than 1.4 billion rupees at the official rate. And what we are doing with that is precisely sustainable tourism. So we are looking, for example, at this Serendipity Trail. We have opened a trail that ultimately will be 300 kilometers long, part of even a wider network where people can walk all around Kandy. This is something that we are doing, and you know, if you look at Santiago de Compostela in Spain, it had 5,000 visitors 30 or 40 years ago, and now there's more than 300,000 or 400,000. So this could be fantastic for Sri Lankan tourism. With this funding, the almost 6 million euro, we are also investing a lot in wellness. So we're going to do a big digital campaign with a top photographer to promote wellness as an experience. And overall, what we want to work on with the Sri Lankan authorities is that tourism from an industry becomes an experience, and that it helps to brand Sri Lanka as a very high quality things. I think that for Sri Lanka, quantity is never the solution, it's quality, and we want to do this journey with the Sri Lankans on tourism.
We will see you shortly on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, travel requirements for inbound tourists to Sri Lanka have been further relaxed by the government. From the beginning of next month, fully vaccinated travellers do not require a pre-departure PCR or rapid antigen test. Industry experts have welcomed the move, saying that it will boost the arrivals and bookings for the upcoming summer season.
When Sri Lanka resumed tourism under the cloud of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, strict quarantine measures were in place for the tourists to prevent the spread of the virus. However, with vaccinations taking place across the globe and showing progress, the measures were gradually reduced. With that, fully vaccinated tourists were encouraged by the tourism authorities to visit Sri Lanka. At the moment, the only requirement for fully vaccinated tourists is a pre-arrival PCR or a rapid antigen test taken 72 hours before boarding to the flight. The vaccination card translated to English is also mandatory. With these relaxed measures, tourist arrivals since last October is hiking gradually. In November, 44,294 tourists have come to Sri Lanka, and in December, the number further increased to 89,506. In the first month of this year, the number was again 80,000 at 82,327. In the first month of this year, the number was again above 80,000 at 82,327. The aim of Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority is to achieve 1.1 million tourists for this year. In this backdrop, the government relaxed the remaining guidelines for fully vaccinated tourists, meaning that they do not need to take rapid PCR antigen tests. In this backdrop, the government relaxed the remaining guidelines for fully vaccinated tourists, meaning they do not need to take PCR or rapid antigen tests before travelling to Sri Lanka. What's mandatory is the proof of vaccination in English. The government says that a tourist who has obtained the double dose regime is considered as fully vaccinated. Children of 18 years and below who have obtained at least a single dose of a COVID vaccine are also considered as fully inoculated. With regard to the travellers with a past history of COVID infection, where infection was detected between 7 days to 6 months, prior to the date of departure with at least a single shot of COVID vaccine, they are exempted from a pre-departure COVID-19 test. However, they need to carry a diagnosis card or verifiable evidence of previously positive COVID-19 test report, either PCR or a RAT test in English to prove their infection. They are also required to depart 2 weeks after vaccination and 7 days after the illness. Meanwhile, travellers with a history of COVID-19 infection more than 6 months before the date of departure with a single dose or 2-dose regime should carry a negative COVID-19 test. They are also required to depart 2 weeks after vaccination. It is mandatory for travellers of 12 years and above who are not fully vaccinated to produce a negative PCR test taken 72 hours prior to the embarkation or a RAT test taken 48 hours prior to embarkation in English. These guidelines will come into effect from the 1st of March. Speaking to AdaDerana English News, the move was welcomed by industry experts.
This move will help us to boost the bookings coming in, especially for the upcoming summer season. Bearing also in mind that all our DMCs as well as even the hoteliers are adhering to safe and secure guidelines set out by KPMG. So I'm sure that will not be a major issue for us, but it's definitely an encouragement and a boost for tourism in the coming months.
The removal of testing for all travelers arriving in the country will be a major boost for the industry as it will reduce costs for children and families who are planning to travel during the forthcoming Easter and spring holiday season. This important announcement is excellent news for our sector's recovery and will be welcomed by millions of fully vaccinated people across the globe who are desperate to travel restrictions-free for the first time after nearly 2 years.
Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires has held further talks on expanding French-Sri Lanka economic relations across a variety of sectors during his visit to France. The Foreign Minister is currently in Geneva, Switzerland to attend the 49th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, which gets underway tomorrow.
During his visit to France, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires called on the Minister Delegate for Trade and Economic Attractiveness, Frank Riester, in the Foreign Ministry in Paris. Discussions were held by the Foreign Minister on obtaining French support for the expansion of economic relations with Sri Lanka for a variety of sectors. A memorandum of understanding was signed between the two ministers at the conclusion of the discussion. In another meeting, Professor Pires had met Councillor Bernard Quinet and head of the International Business Network, Estelle Gillot, at the Chamber of Commerce of France. The key focus of the talks was networking arrangements between French and Sri Lankan companies and French expertise for educational programs in entrepreneurship, business management and related subjects. Further, the Foreign Minister also held talks with Vice President MEDEF International, Francois Corbin, which is the largest association of companies in France. The minister also met several other French corporate leaders during his visit. At the moment, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires is in Geneva for the 49th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, which will get underway tomorrow. The Council will discuss the human rights situation of Sri Lanka on Thursday, the 3rd of March. Further, an interactive dialogue on the written update of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on enhancing its monitoring and reporting on the situation of human rights in Sri Lanka will also be held.
Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, is scheduled to meet His Holiness Pope Francis tomorrow. The Cardinal left Sri Lanka for the Vatican City on the 23rd of February. During tomorrow's official talks with the Pope, the present status of the ongoing investigations pertaining to the 2019 Easter Sunday terror attacks is expected to be discussed. Further, the stance of the Catholic Church is also expected to be taken into consideration by the Pope. In the meantime, a protest calling for justice for the victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks was also held at the St. Peter's Square today. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says that programs are being worked off to meet the basic needs of the people while also creating new employment opportunities. Speaking at an event in Hambantota, he went on to say that the former government was more focused on revenge rather than development of the country and its people.
The Kirama Katuwana integrated water treatment plant and the Kirama bus stand in the Hambantota district were vested in the public today by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. The water treatment plant in Kirama, which was funded by both Sri Lankan and Australian governments, will supply water for 43 Gramanildara divisions in the Hambantota district.
පෞගිය ආණ්ඩුව කාලෙම මේ ප්‍රදේශයේ විතරක් නෙවෙයි මුළු රටේම සංවර්ධන කටයුතු ඇනහිල්ලා තිබුණා. ජාත්‍යන්තර වරාය හැදීම වේවා, ගුවන් තොටුපොළ හැදීම වේවා, මේ සියල්ලක්ම මේ ප්‍රදේශවල දියුණුවට කරපු වැඩ කටයුතු එදා ඒ ආණ්ඩුව අපෙන් පරිගන්න හිතාගෙන නැවැත්තුවා. කාගෙන්ද පරිගත්තේ? මේ හම්බන්තොට දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ජනතාවගෙන්, ගොන්රාගල දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ජනතාවගෙන්, එමෙ නැත්නම් මේ ප්‍රදේශයේ රට පුරා හිටපු අපේ ජනතාවගෙන් පරිගැනීම තමයි අවසානයේදී සිදු වුණේ. මිනිසුන්ට මූලිකව අවශ්‍ය වෙන දේවල් ලබා දීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙල අපි ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන යනවා. රැකියා අවස්ථාවන් ලබා දීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙලට අලුත් යෝජනා ක්‍රම, කර්මාන්ත ඇතුළු හඳුන්වා දීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙල අපි ආරම්භ කරන්න දැන් පටන් අරන් තියෙනවා.
Vice-Chancellor of the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, Professor Sudhant Liyanage, says that presence of foreign students in local universities is an important factor for the university to climb up the global ranking ladder. While elaborating this fact, he also criticised the attitude of local university students for not looking at the bigger picture and disapproving the presence of foreign students in local universities.
The 25th anniversary celebration of the establishment of the Department of Marketing Management of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce at the University of Sri Jayawardenepura was held recently at the University Auditorium. Speaking at the event, Vice-Chancellor of the University, Senior Professor Sudanta Liyanage explained the importance of foreign students' presence in local universities.
Very recently, 30,000 universities were ranked. Within Sri Lanka, we are now third best university. I hope that by next year, we can definitely come to the second place. But still our ranking in the world ranking system, somewhere around 2,000. We know that there are some factors affecting us. One of the biggest issues we are facing is the presence of foreign students. Because in Sri Lankan context, even we don't have spaces for our own children, how we are going to accept the foreign student, that is a problem. But the marks are given for the presence of foreign students. So therefore, we have to think about our strategies. If you're really thinking about the world rank, high rank university, the culture of international students is extremely important. Sometimes you may get disheartened why we are at the 2000 place, why we can't be in the first 1000, why we can't be in the first 100. We can't because our culture not permitting us to do this upgrading of these things. Even the student society is also not very happy with getting international students. Finally, the university matters. Still, most of the students are very young. But if you just go to the society, everybody will ask you, what is the university you obtain your first degree? If it is a high rank, world rank university, so automatically it will give you some flavor to your life.
Now, Sri Lanka Navy has taken an Indian trawler with 8 Indian fishermen into custody while poaching in Sri Lankan waters. The arrests were made last night in seas north of Talimena during a patrol. Indian fishermen poaching in Sri Lankan waters has become a major flashpoint with India, and various protest wells are worked off by the northern fishing community in the recent past. At the time of their arrest, the Indian fishermen had been using the banned destructive fishing method known as bottom trawling. With the latest arrest, the Navy has taken 9 Indian fishing vessels with 59 fishermen poaching in Sri Lankan waters into custody so far in the month of February this year. A fire broke out in a building located along Jampeta Street in Colombo and spread to nearby buildings earlier today. The fire brigade said that 10 firefighting vehicles were deployed to help douse the flames. The fire had reportedly erupted in a storage complex housing tractor spare parts and equipment. The flames also spread to several adjacent buildings, including houses in the area. However, the cause of the fire is yet to be ascertained. Market analysts expect positive sentiment at the Colombo Stock Exchange in the week ahead, with buying interest and investor confidence. The all share price index entered positive territory last Friday with a massive gain of 450.85 points to end at 11,107.90. The S&P SL20 index meanwhile ended at 3,742.33, following a gain of 157.75 points. Now let's take a look at what we can expect at the Colombo stock market in the week ahead.
We feel that the market is likely to be quite positive in the upcoming week. Especially it is starting a new month, and the month of March we feel that there will be more positive interest coming in because the earnings that has been released are good, and the market after the significant decline is sort of trading at somewhat of attractive levels, and most of these counters have significantly come down, and there is likely to be more buying interest at the current levels of the market. So with it, we feel that there will be a lot more buying interest and confidence level among investors to enter into the market, and that will be a positive sign for the overall index. And turnover levels and volumes are likely to be at the moderate levels, and with it we feel that there is likely to be a continuous uptrend in the market. However, the power crisis and the fuel shortage is likely to have somewhat of a impact in the market, but the overall trend with the current low levels of the ASPI, it is likely to trend positively.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.